From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Same-sex marriage in Australia is the title of our episode on the 16th of November 2017. We'll get that in a minute, and we'll also bring you up to date on the NBA scores from last night. That's the National Basketball Association. Nonetheless, in Australia, there was a vote on same-sex marriage, and we'll get to it. This is inspired by Mr. Conley of the Seattle Post-Intelligence here, an article that he has written here on the vote, a landslide vote there in Australia. We'll also have the latest on Judge Roy Moore. Roy Moore, sort of like Judge Roy Beam. He's been in the news. The Chinese premier, Mr. Z, asked DJ Trump about this Roy Moore. People actually want to know what it is all about, what is Mr. Moore up to, and they basically finding out what he's up to. It's sort of like a soap opera. Every day someone from 30 years ago or whatever says, well, they've encountered Roy Moore. A lady encountered him in her office. What amazes me about these charges, most of these women, sort of like with Daddy Bush, as he's known, the President George H.W. Bush, groping some woman, feeling on some woman's bottom from his wheelchair. Well, this sort of thing makes for news, but it turns to a free-ring circus. The latest there in Alabama is that Judge Moore's attorney, that is trying to get hold of a copy of the yearbook from this lady named Nelson, and they want to authenticate the handwriting. They're comparing it to Judge Moore. Judge Moore said he did not recall ever signing his signature as DA. Now, this is a kind of an interesting situation in what we don't recall. The former senator, Beauregard Sessions, before the Senate the other day, claimed he didn't recall anything. And it's kind of an interesting thing when you look at the cultural or social values part of the Republican Party's vote. They go every year, that's the Republican candidates, DJ Trump was there, etc., to the Value Voters Summit. We've covered those in many years past. The speakers were all there. Sarah Palin, she hasn't chimed in on this one yet. Sarah Palin was there, and various other types. Bachman, the former Congress type, was also there. So in other words, all these people were there one time or the other at the Value Vote Summit, which is roughly 40-something% of the GOP vote. So that's the significance of that particular situation. We'll also have the latest, we'll say, machinations on the GOP tax plan, which they now want to include the Obamacare mandates. That's where people are mandated to pay if they do not get health insurance. Now, there's not a penalty. It's just added to their tax bill, sort of like a revolving charge account. They're not throwing anyone in jail on those mandates. But several senators have come out against that plan. We'll bring you up to date on the latest from that particular plan and where it is. I was talking to a lady, a social worker, that obviously is very concerned about the escapades of Judge Moore 40 years ago. But she worked with children that have repressed memories of traumatized children. Now, these women are not children, so a totally different situation. Well, where do we go on something of that nature? Well, very, very difficult to say because of the time frames. I think the latest encounter was Judge Moore in his office with some lady that was there, I believe, to get a divorce or a separation or custody battle or whatever it was, and she had to say checkered past. Well, all kinds of people come out of the woodworks in these kinds of things. The only, I think, gauge here is that we'll have some latest polling, incidentally. He's dropped a few points. But evidently the undecided are waiting around to see if the big one hits. When you have all these charges, I've just finished Donna Bazille's book, Hacks, and she talks about the same thing and what happened with DJ Trump. The Access Hollywood video, DJ Trump just attacked the women, said he was doing a little locker room talk, and it blew over him like the Teflon King. So in other words, there's precedence to that. Some of the Republicans are saying, well, if old Judge Moore is elected, we'll throw him out of the Senate. Well, that's hard to do. We did a special program on that and invite you to listen to it. The Adam Clayton Powelling of Judge Moore. Adam Clayton Powell, incidentally, was a Baptist minister. He was the head of the largest church in Harlem at the time, the Ascension Baptist Church, and he was also chair of the House Education Subcommittee, wrote much of the civil rights legislation there. He knew how to get things done. He was a very articulate man. And they did not like him, particularly the Southerners. He flaunted in their face, so to speak, drove around in a sporting car, was a man of many women, not like Judge Moore. But anyway, nonetheless, they first demoted him or took away his chairships in the House, and some very important ones at that time. The chair of Health, Education, and Welfare was a very important position, and he got it by the seniority system. That's why the Republicans attacked the seniority system, went into term limiting until they got in power, and we haven't heard anything else about term limits, except for states that have term limits, that is. But nonetheless, back to Representative Powell. He sued. The speaker at the time was old man John McCormick. He was from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and he won his lawsuit. So it is very, very hard to expel someone when the people, it was in that case, was the people of Harlem. And later, Representative Powell lost to our own Charlie Rangel, who just recently retired. Most people don't remember that. Obviously, that was in the 70s. But back to Alabama, you have to look at the social values wingness of people that are evangelical Christians. They have become more vocal. We saw a kid the other day. He had a "Don't Tread on Me" cap on and a big cross on him there. Well, these people are out there. They're about 40-something% of the Republican Party's vote, depending on which state you're in. A very large area, and their beliefs are pretty much common. They're against abortion. That's one of the things they're against. They're against same-sex marriage. That's why we're tying it in with our program here and what's happening in Australia. And also we'll deal with turnout in Australia as opposed to turnout here. We covered a few city elections, municipal elections, one out in Seattle. I don't remember what the turnout was out there right now. Around about 50% or so. That's usually what you get in the U.S. We are coming on another election coming up, runoff actually, in Atlanta, Georgia. Mrs. Bottoms, I believe, against Norwood, a conservative Democrat / many people think she's Republican. That's in Atlanta, Georgia, to replace Kareem Reed there in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia, incidentally, has had an African-American mayor since the 70s, Mr. Jackson, the late Mr. Jackson, whom the airport is, well, partially named after him, Maynard Jackson. But nonetheless, it is a situation there in Atlanta, but it's, ongoing. I think the turnout there was a little less than 50%. Most of these municipal or city elections around 50% or less. We also covered one out in the Midwest. There were two cities there, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Their turnout there was about 40% in Minneapolis. I'm not certain, I don't remember precisely what the turnout was in St. Paul, but they used something called ranked choice. I call it racist choice. But a number of people were running. The one in St. Paul was a little different. They elected an African-American mayor, Mr. Carter. But the one in Minneapolis had a number of people running. I believe two were endorsed by the Bernie Sanders organization. Well, at least one was endorsed there, and Of course, then you had the mayor, who was a liberal Democrat, you'd call a progressive, and you had some pro-business candidates. You had two of those in the race, and then you had the Bernie man, and you had an African-American law professor, former head of the NAACP, running also. So there were about 5 of them there, and the mayor ended up in 3rd place. But the individual that is now elected the mayor, a protege of a former mayor, and one of the characters from reading Donna Brazil's book, named Slick Bobby Ryback. Nonetheless, old Slick Bobby was a vice chair of the party, and was when they're running to be chair. This is the Democratic Party. Didn't make it, fortunately. Known racist. So the one of the candidates there is a protege of his, pro-business type. They had one other pro-business type. They ended up, the pro-business types, that is, were in first, second, and third, but with ranked choice. It ended up, the Bernie candidate was second, and the fellow that had roughly 25% of the vote ended up, because you go from your second choice to your third choice, and the one at the bottom is eliminated, so forth and so on. Anyway, nonetheless, when the Bernie candidate was eliminated, that pushed the other fellow over the top. So, in other words, he went from 25% to, I think, 56 or whatever percentage it was, of a 40% turnout. So that sort of shows you how the voting machinations can go. So in Alabama, we don't know what the voting turnout will be for a runoff election. It could possibly be 50% or more. And what Judge Moore has been doing is working his base. Does it matter? Well, to the evangelicals, probably not as much. There was a recent poll, probably an outliner there, but nonetheless, 60% were cognizant or worried or whatever you want to say about the recent machinations of Judge Moore, and 40% were not. So you still have these undecided. They're just waiting to see if the other handle drops. In other words, if old Judge Moore has done anything in the last few years. Hadn't found that out yet. But as far as we know from the history in this very little small town, the people there all knew about Judge Moore and the mall and whatever else. There's some Hickory restaurant that's long gone. So you're dealing 40 years ago. Well, it's quite obvious from even the casual reader that the Republican leadership under old man McConnell do not want to see Mr. Moore in Washington. They're all they came out against him, so now that is where that race goes. Let's go to the Australian race. We'll start out in Seattle. Back same-sex marriage in, this is Mr. Conley, in a landslide. The citizens of Australia overwhelmingly voted in favor of same-sex marriage in a nationwide mail-in poll, a plebiscite that drew 12,727,820,000 votes. Almost 80% of the electorate voted there. The Aussies followed the footsteps of 3 American states, Washington and Maryland and Maine. They were in 2012. They had it on the ballot there. The vote down under was, and we'll get to that in a minute here, was 61%. We'll get to these actual figures. But the Prime Minister there, Turnbull, a backer of marriage equality, they call it, called for the vote as a way of ending resistance centered in his own conservative Liberal Party. Now, the Liberal Party there is not what you would think it is. The Australian Parliament must still pass legislation, is expected to do before the Christmas holiday. Australian people have spoken, and they voted overwhelmingly yes to commitment, yes, for marriage equality. So the upcoming debate in Parliament is expected to mirror the same-sex issues in the U.S. This is why we went into that. Should photographers, bakers, now that's something that has not been solved in the U.S. It's before the Supreme Court. Now, should a baker bake a cake? Does he not want to bake it for a same-sex couple. Well, it's obviously just discrimination on the face. If you're a baker, you whatever, a candlestick maker, and you're open to the public, you cannot refuse. I remember once restaurants would do that after the apartheid days. They'd put a sign up, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Well, if they got sued, they didn't do that. But this is where the Republican Party here stand. So in other words, if you are just centering on Roy Moore, doesn't work out that way. Let's go to the Australian Broadcasting Company. Why the NSW had the most margin, yes, of any state. Let's just read this thing here. One statistic that surprised many Australians in the same-sex marriage vote, that New South Wales had the most yes margins of any state. Just 57.8% that voted yes. That's 2,374,362, with a significant 42%, are 1,736,838 voting no. Every other state was above 60% yes, but the Australian Capital Territory topped 74%. Victoria close behind with 64%. The AC has a small population with 175,400 ticking yes, and 61,520 no. I expected a massive yes vote in the NSW. Surprised to learn it was closer margin in basing the rest of the country. Now let me just move on down here. Number of electorate where more than 50% voted no. That would be New South Wales. Well, yeah, we don't want to get into that one now. The New South Wales metropolitan electorate were the highest yes vote seats in the country, with Sydney tying with Melbourne for the nation's most strong in favor, 83.7%. You could expect that in Sydney, a metropolitan area there. Even rural seats in Western North NSW were relatively strong, skewed to yes. It was seats in Southwest Sydney, many of which have a largely social conservative immigrant population, that was more likely to vote no. Out of the 150 federal electoral districts, 133 recorded majority yes responses, and just 17 recorded majority no responses. Most of these are Labour-held Western Sydney electorate, including the top no-voting seat of Baxter Land, held by whomever it is, Jason Clare. I have no idea who Jason Clare is. Baxter Land, where 73.9% voted no, taken in the working class suburbs of Bankstown, Auburn, and Chester Hill. I'll have to ask my friend there about that. Anyway, there are 7,817,247 votes for yes, 4,873,987 for no. A further 36,000 are 2/10%. Well, unclear. The former Prime Minister Abbott, seat in Warrington, registered a 75% yes, with the while the Prime Minister Turnbull of Wentworth was even higher at 80.8%. The top were two Liberal-held electorates in SW, with Mr. Abbott's electorate at the 10th highest. And this is how the vote here, 61.6% yes, 37.4% no. This is national. And if we go for a breakdown graph, we put this up on Facebook page. The Australian Capital Territory was the highest yes, with 74% to 26% no. Victoria came in second with 64.9%. Western Australia was 63.7% yes, 36.3% no. Tasmania close behind with 63 point, talking about the Outback, 63.6% yes and 36% no. South Australia at 62.5%. Followed by Queensland with 60.7%. The Northwest Territory at 60.6%. Excuse me. Should the law be changed to allow same-sex couples to marry? We already gave that percentage, but we look at this, yes, 57.8% in New South Wales, Victoria 64.9%, Queensland 60%, South Australia 62.5%, Western Australia 63%, Tasmania 63.6%, and all of these except for New South Wales had 42.2% no. The Northwest Territory 60.6%, it came in there pretty close, and the Australian Capital Territory 74%. That was some of the breakdowns, and we go to Sydney. Tanya Pilbersek, 83.7. I won't go into all these. And Melbourne at 63.7. These are various entities within Australia. Yes, and some of the no votes that stood out, we already named Baxter Land, Watson, including Sydney, a Serb of Pinch Bowl. This is around Sydney there anyway. Some of the others I'm not so sure about. There were just 3 no voting electorates in Queensland. So, cent.All anyway. The overall participation rate, this is what we want to get into, was 79.5%. In South Wales, 79.5%. Victoria, 81.7%. Queensland, 77.9%. Well, I sound like a DJ here. And in South Australia, 79.7%. West Australia, 78.4%. Tasmania, 79.7%. In the Northwest Territory at 58.4%. A little lower here, but they only had 80,000 or so votes. And the Capital Territory at 82.4%. The turnout, nearly 8 of 10 Australians responded to the survey. That's 12,727,920 out of 16,618 there. Participation rate was 79%. They mailed those out in Australia. Everybody gets a ballot. Of all groups were the highest, 70% of participants. All age groups were higher than 70%, with older ones having slightly higher. Old Australians. Those aged 70 to 74 were most likely to respond to the survey, with 89.6%. The younger group of eligible Australians, 18 to 19, were most likely, 78% of them. So this is the Australian Broadcast Company. Women participated more than men, 81.6%. And let's see, 77.3% of eligible males. So that was 5 million, 6 million there. Participation by states, we went through that. And females, females were 81.6%, males 77.3%. And we went over some of the age groups there. We look at 18, anyway, we'll look at 25, 29, all of them have been in the 70s. None of these down. But as we get older here, we start with the 45 to 49, 80.8% there, and it keeps going up. The over 85, they were 78.8%. Cry your heart out here, and this is the article. A very nice article here. Let's take a look at. Let's just hear from old Judge Moore while we're in the middle of this. This is Judge Moore talking to some religious meeting.
I'm playing a little part in this scenario going on in the country. Obviously, I've made a few people mad. I'm the only one that can unite Democrats and Republicans. Because I seem to be opposed by both. They've spent over $30 million trying to take me out. They've done everything they could, and now they're together to try to keep me from going to Washington. And why? But it has a lot to do with what we're talking about tonight. We want our country to be saved by God, but we got a part in it if we humble ourselves and pray and seek His face and turn from our wicked ways. But it goes further in 2 Chronicles. It says this: "But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land which I have given them. And this house which I have sanctified for my name will I cast out of my sight. And this house shall be astonishment to everyone that passeth by. So that you say, why has the Lord done thus into this land and into this house? And it shall be answered, because they forsook the Lord God of their fathers." I submit to you that
that was Judge Roy Moore speaking to some religious congregation. This is incidentally at the Alabama.com. Various people coming out here. This the owners of this, the Alabama Media Organization, are not more supporters, which becomes apparent. In another footnote here, the Alabama Baptists condemned alt-right and white supremacy. This is the Southern Baptists of Alabama. You could put this as a positive note. Let's move on to the Washington Post, because we want to get the Republican latest machinations with their tax plan. A quote from a Justice Department official said it's grotesque. A veteran recalls that the idea of another special prosecutor. That's the idea of prosecuting or persecuting Hillary the Monster Clinton and the Bill Clinton Foundation. Evidently, it's been before some committees, so again, it's one of those situations. We have, let's see what... the Senate changes tax bill to add mandates. Let me just make sure that I'm on the right date here for the Washington Post. I guess I am. Okay. Anyway, they're still doing sessions. I thought we got ahead of this, but I suppose we did not get ahead of it. We'll assume we did. Anyway, to the Republicans' tax bill. Incidentally, the Cook Report has also... oh, this is not right. Just a minute here. For some reason, we are a day behind with this. And do it again. Because this is absolutely not the correct for whatever reason, not the correct edition of the Washington Post. Hey, well, wait a minute. Well, they've not come up to date on their let's see if they have. Having some machinations going on here, and we need to... I think we'll go to Politico for this. Yeah, this is an old story on... let's just go to Politico, because several senators have come out against this. I'm not sure what is going on here, but oh boy, this is from Politico. Headline here: GOP leaders weigh drastic plan to save the seat. With less than 4 weeks to special election, McConnell and his discussing the legal feasibility of asking the appointed the appointed senator Sir Rupert Strangelove to resign from his seat in order to trigger a new special election. Now that's just crazy. He's expressed questions, saying uncertainty whether such a move and one of some. This is just crazy here. They have a new poll out that shows Doug Jones ahead by 12. That's an outliner there, and we don't even need to worry about that. But engaged in back channel conversations, President spoke with McConnell. I mean, all these characters are plotting. On Tuesday, Selby spoke with the governor there, Ivey, who is nothing more than a flunky, dismissed the possibility of moving the election date. I mean, this is nowhere else would this happen than anywhere else. This just goes to the point that I need to laugh here, but it's strange. Even Sean Hannity's come out with a new ultimatum. I mean, this is just a circus. This is really, honestly, beyond what is a circus. It's turned into, who knows what it's turned into. It's turned to something. So they now got somebody named Glenna Johnson. I think her claim to fame is being a check writing specialist. Is her claim, and I mean, they've got them all here at once. So it's we don't know. I mean, well, we don't know. Nonetheless, on the tax writing situation here, they have come with a new two senators, I should say, have come out against the tax plan as it is. So one just does not know. I mean, it's elephant tusk has entered this theme now. Trophies from elephant hunts in Zimbabwe were banned in the U.S. In the U.S., Trump just reversed that. Oh, he's going into elephant tusk business now. I mean, it's just. I mean, this gets to the point that is no point. I've been looking at some of the headlines here, and we finally find that the tax plan's in trouble after Senator says he won't back it. This is Johnson out of Wisconsin said he opposed both the Senate and House versions of the tax plan earlier. Susan Collins, she's from Maine. She has mixed feelings about it. She killed the last scheme they had. Without Johnson and Collins, the Republicans would need other members of their caucus to save the plan. Well, yeah. So this is the Affordable Care Act. The mandates the opposition to the $1.5 trillion bill threatens what had been growing momentum there. This is this tax cut scheme that they want to deliver to business and Wall Street. Changes made Tuesday, including removing the individual mandates, which would save the government $300 billion over the next decade, as it paid out less to subsidize low-income, middle-class people, according to the Congressional Budget Office. The change would also, according to CBO, result in 13 million more Americans going without coverage. This is just not going to fly. This is crazy. The businesses are truly engine of innovation and job creation. This is from Senator Johnson. They should not be left behind. Now, allowing the tax deductions to expire would increase taxes for these companies paid by around $45 billion a year, as according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. They still have one. Several other critics of it, including Bob Coker, he's from Tennessee, had expressed the situation. Another potential holdout, Senator McCain, the old man McCain. So in other words, they are in a lot of trouble on this particular situation, their tax bill. Orrin Hatch, typically one of the chamber's most congenial members, blasted, bristled at a tax. Well, anyway, I'm not sure what this is about. But according to John Foon, he's from South Dakota, member of the Finance Committee, and the leadership raised the possibility Republicans might hold a vote once the bill comes to the Senate floor to waive the budget rule and allow individuals cuts to be permanent. This would require 60 votes. Well, they don't have 60 votes. Democrats' support, however, remains elusive. Joe Meacham, he's he's from West Virginia, said he has been in touch with the White House in recent days about supporting the plan, but I don't see it improving. So in other words, they don't have any improvements coming, and there's just nothing in the air for these fellows to do. I mean, it's bleak, as they say, as far as any tax plans and schemes are out here. It's uranium deal, that's with Clinton, that's one of the things they wanted to investigate. In an unfortunate situation, let me just get this and then we'll do the sport here. Cordray, he's from Ohio. He's going to resign from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, will resign his post at the end of the month, giving DJ Trump an opportunity to reshape the agency that's drawn relentless attacks from the business community. You know, I made the announcement in an email to the Bureau staff on Wednesday. This is a mistake. It has been a joy. Well, forget all that. It's likely to put the Bureau under control of Steve Mnuchin, oh boy, who could delegate day-to-day operations to an interim director. According to the White House, Codray's departure kicks off a high-stakes scramble to secure the future of the Consumer Protection Bureau. We need to appoint someone who has a proven track record, no doubt about that, but they won't do this. Period. And it's a sad situation. Cordray is leaving. The agency here. Now, some was saying he wanted to run in Ohio for governor. Warren was immediately taken to task by the forget that. The Consumer Banking Association, American Banking Association, and other groups have endorsed a plan to replace the loan director system with a 5-member commission. The idea is to further weaken it, no doubt about that. And they would love to do this. Ohio words, but no candidate would be able to match the funding of DeWine and those people. The Attorney General DeWine, Secretary Huster, each have $2.5 million in the first 6 months. The Republican opponents have been building a momentum war chest to succeed Governor John Kirsch if he chooses to run. And see, this is a situation that should not happen. He should remain there, period. To Cordray going to Ohio, he still could lose the race. Now, there are some people in Ohio that could run. Nina Turner, we're thinking of there. Betty Sutton, who has been around for a very, very long time. But none of these people have the money. The Democratic Party in Ohio is reorganizing and trying to move along. Now, this is one of those situations very unwise. Anyway, let's do this sports. Speaking of unwise things, there's always something unwise going on around here. Let's see. In Zimbabwe, we'll do a special on this. The president there, President Mugabe is under house arrest. The military has decided that they can conduct policy, and it is a farce. It's a sad situation. President Mugabe has led that nation for over 30 years, genuine revolutionary there, and we'll have to spend some time to move forward on that. That we'll have time to properly deal with it. We'll deal with that as soon as is possible. On to the NBA, the National Basketball Association. We had the scores up here now. We got to get them back, which we shall. These are from last night, incidentally, on the 25th. The Kings were at the Hawks in Atlanta. Hawks won 126-80. Ooh. The Wizards were at the Heat. Wizards won 102-93. The Jazz at the Knickerbockers. Knickerbockers 106-101. The Cavaliers were at the Hornets. Cavaliers 115-107. They were just too much for them. The Pacers and Grizzlies. The Pacers 116-113. The Pistons and Bucks. Bucks 99-95. Close game there. Spurs and T-Wolves. T-Wolves 1-1 at home. 98-86. Start of season. The Raptors in Pelicans in the Big Easy. Raptors 125-116. The Bulls and Thunder. Thunder 92-79. The Magic and Trailblazers out in Portland. The Trailblazers 99-94. The 76ers and the Lakers in Los Angeles. 76ers 115-109. And that ends that. Same-sex marriage in Australia is the title of this episode from WBRN Radio in Boston on the Boston Red Network. As we roll merrily along, we'll see you on Thursday, Friday Job, our magazine program, and over the weekend we have the Week It Was and the Monday Morning Quarterback, and of course we'll have Numbers Man, and we're working on an open source report and some of the other programs. Hopefully we'll eventually get a program out here on the President's visit to Vietnam. Good day.